there, everybody. Yeah, I guess you better listen. This is Mary Wieden, because we have got a man in the studio who wants to be the next mayor at what I think is a very critical time for the city of Jackson. It's amazing to me, Senator John Horhn, who wants to be Mayor John Horhn, that Jackson, a capital city in the South that's growing, is not doing well. Let me just put it that way. You know, I mean, we know that there are parts of the city that are, and I can't help but think, well, all these other states around us are doing well, and you've been in economic development, so you know. Is it the capital city must have a great influence on that, because you know it's the capital, and it's so needy. I don't know where you would start, but I should tell the audience, by the way, you've done all these things. You've been on the Tourism Commission, you've been in federal and state programs and other things as well, so you know economic development, you know these things. So is that what propelled you to become a candidate for mayor?
Well, let me say, first of all, no one in their right mind would want this job. It is a near impossible job. But my dad takes part of the credit or blame for this. When we were growing up, whenever we would complain about something, he'd say, "What are you going to do about it?" Oh. And so we, rather than complaining about Jackson, what are you going to do about it? We're going to try to turn the city around.
Yep, it needs a big steering wheel.
Huge turn.
It really does.
That's
By the way, let me tell the audience, if you'd like to call us up and talk with Senator John Horhn, 888-808-8637 is our phone number. You can text us at 601-879-4395, and you can watch us because we live stream supertalk.fm/Mary, so you can see what we look like. And if you happen to miss the show for some reason, or if you have to jump back in, you can catch it for another day or two anyway. It'll be on there right there for you to see. So where do you start? Presuming that you become mayor, where do you start? Is it with crime? Is it with streets? Is it with water? I know how you feel about the water thing, and we'll talk about that later. But you know, where?
Well, I think you start with putting a plan together. The city has not had any sort of plan to speak of in the last quarter of a century. And, you know, the old adage, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. And I think that's, you know, Jackson is surviving in spite of itself. But the first thing that needs to happen is we got to put a plan of action together that involves every ward in the city, that has citizen input and that has a prioritization of what you start first, and then you just tick down that list.
What are you hearing from people? What are they saying? Hey, we want you to become mayor because we want da-da-da-da. What are they saying? You
know, people are overwrought in every direction, in every sense in Jackson. We feel like the city is broken and that it's sinking. You know, somebody was saying that if we keep going the way we're going, somebody's just going to flush us down the Pearl River and send us to the Gulf.
That's problematic.
You know, I do believe that, given the city's history, that it is in our DNA to survive. And we've seen great examples of individuals who have personal achievements that have been remarkable, that have been earth-shattering in some ways. And so that's in our DNA to be able to survive. But you have to have good leadership in order to be able to point that survival instinct in the right direction.
Well, you have such an interesting background. Tourism was one of your things. You ran the tourism department for a while, and that is such an important thing for the city of Jackson. And I don't know what would propel people to come to Jackson except, well, like if the zoo. If people know about the zoo, there's never any advertising or anything, and the zoo is off and on. By the way, do you think it should be moved or shut down, or what do you think ought to happen to the zoo?
I'm ambivalent. I think that there's certainly an argument to be made to put it near the Natural Science Museum, the Children's Museum, the Ag and Forestry Museum.
And I-55.
but I think that ship has sailed. I think that the Children's Museum and the leadership over there have made other plans for the available land there, so that may not be an option for the zoo. But I do think that it needs to have a lot of improvements made to it. If you move it, you have to put something there in its place. And from my taste, I think something that's sports related would go well there. Some sort of an amusement center would go well there. But this calls for a much deeper conversation than what we have this morning. But I think as far as the moving of it over on I-55, I think that ship has sailed.
It's a shame, if you ask me. And I know it's like, well, Mary, there's other stuff to talk about besides the zoo. I realize that. But it's been such a big thing, and it's an economic development. That's where I'm getting to. As far as economic development, what does the city need? Obviously, get rid of the garbage out there. Get rid of Hotel O and stuff like this.
I had an old college mate of mine he didn't call me. He sent me a text and just dog cussed me because somehow the Oyo was still on reservation lists. So he booked a room there, and you can imagine his surprise when he showed up.
The first thing you have to do is clean up your room.
Clean up the parking lot.
If you
but whoever manages that sort of thing needs to take that property off the reservations list, because you can't stay there, of course. But I think the second thing that I would want to do is clean this place up. It just looks absolutely horrible. It's embarrassingly horrible. And so doing blight elimination and cleaning up a lot of overgrowth and getting the creeks and the waterways cleared out so you don't have the flooding problem that we are prone to get in Jackson. Those would be some of the first things I want to do. You can't. If the place doesn't look good, you're not going to attract anybody there.
I thought that when Deion Sanders was here, I thought it was terribly important for the city to at least clean up when you exit onto and off of I-55 going over to the stadium. I mean, this is the first thing people see, and they would be coming from all over the place just to look at him. The team too, but to look at him. I don't know if anything much happened, but that would be a simple thing to do, but it wasn't done, and it isn't done. I don't understand why that's not done.
Well, I think our letting Deion get away was one of the worst mistakes we could have made.
I agree.
He was great for Mississippi. He was great for Jackson. He was great for Jackson State, and he was great for HBCUs.
Yes, he was, and he ain't doing so good out there, I don't think. It's not the same as it was here. Yes, sir. Mr. Lance, what you got?
Our Senator Horhn, I've been at UMMC a good bit lately, up on the 5th floor, and as you look out over Jackson, it is so green. There's so many great attributes, as you said, cleaning it up. But when you see it from the air, there's trees everywhere. I mean, it's one of those unique cities out there that actually has merged the green and the concrete. Well, and I just want to say, I think you're right, cleaning it up. And I just want to make that point that we have a beautiful city and opportunity, but we've got to see a plan to bring it back. How do you feel about that?
I was going to say, when I was up in the helicopter, we'd fly over the city, and it was so beautiful. It was like, how can the city have so many problems? It's such a beautiful city with all the greenery is more than anything. And then during the holidays, you'd see a lot of lighting. But yeah, go ahead. Where do you start? Well, we know where you start, but where? Once we put our plan of action together, we worked the plan, and but again, I think that the cosmetic aspect of Jackson needs to be improved tremendously. There are parts of the city that look like a bomb has dropped in them, in it, and it affects morale. It affects the impression that people have of us when they come to visit. So the cosmetic improvements have got to be top of the list. And along those lines, streets and sewers and things like that. I mean, there are already bombs in some of these streets that see they're just falling through because it hasn't been taken care of yet. And you got supposedly the money, right?
I was the author of the 1 cent sales tax back in 2011, but it did not get passed by the citizens until 2014 because a mayor at the time refused to bring it up to the council for a vote. It was when a new mayor came in that they embraced it.
Which mayors were those? I mean, there was
Harvey Johnson was the mayor at the time we passed the legislation. But after he had a chance to think about it and it sank in that we had a commission to put the master plan together, then he soured on the idea, and so he wouldn't bring it up. Mayor Lumumba, as councilman, called the 1 cent sales tax commission colonialism. But and he campaigned against the 1 cent sales tax. But when he became mayor, the first thing out of his mouth is we have to have that 1 cent sales tax. So it generates about $13.5 million, and that's not enough. It's good money, but it's not enough for our street issues. We have the water situation pretty much rectified. we're working on the wastewater issue, and we got, in addition to the $800 million for the water, we got $125 million for wastewater, but that's not enough. It's about $1 billion fix. So it's expected that the revenue that the Water Sewer Administration will generate will pay for the wastewater. But we still have the streets left.
Yes.
And that $13.5 million is just not enough. So we're either going to have to increase that 1 cent sales tax, get help from the state, get help from the federal government, or find some other options.
Speaking of water, you're not in favor of Hennepin, et cetera. You're not in favor of the government running it. You want it to be the city's water department?
It's the city's enterprise, and the city ought to be allowed to run and manage it.
But look what happened.
The question is, how does that work?
Yes.
And so I don't know that anyone contemplates it going back to the city entirely. But I think that the person who's going to have a big say in how it happens and gets rolled out is the federal judge. And I'm speaking of Judge Wingate in this case. Mm-hmm. He's got the case, and I think he will have a lot to say about future governance.
Well, the good thing about it is if they run it, then it's their problem. Let them run it. Let them, do the billing and all that kind of stuff. Get the money, give it to the city instead of you having to go through all that.
Well, the city cannot use revenue from an enterprise system, water sewer system. If whatever revenue is collected has to go back into that system.
Well, most cities anyway do run their own city department, water department. They collect the bills, the money from the bills, and that does stay within that department anyway. Mm-hmm. But so whatever Judge Wingate decides will decide this thing on the water.
I think there are certain legislators that want to have their say about it too. Yes. And we've seen a couple of years where bills have been proposed, but they didn't get through the process.
So the other thing I wonder about with Jackson is it a water question, Lance?
Well, that was my question was,
okay.
Are there any low-hanging fruit items that can create revenue for the city that maybe we haven't seen? Is there some way to create revenue in the system, in the situation we have, Jackson needing revenue, and was curious if there's something we're missing out there?
Money. We just got to get it from somewhere. But well, that's a fair question. But the other thing I was wondering about, it's also in the hands of the courts, is the airport situation. In 2016, the legislature passed this thing to create sort of like a reservoir board where you got people from around the surrounding area who would be board members and contributing to how the airport is run. The city objected. And that's been in the hands of, I think, Judge Carlton Reeves, right? That's been his thing. What do you think about that?
Well, we're in an 8-year battle that never should have been the case. I think that cooler heads should have prevailed and a compromise could have been reached. I think a compromise can still be reached. And it makes it tougher right now for a hostile takeover, and that's what this is, a hostile takeover. Senator Raphael Warnock did an amendment to the FAA administration's legislation this year that makes it very tough for a hostile takeover to occur, especially if it has not gone into litigation. So we're in litigation now, and the FAA administrator will have final say as to the future ownership of the Jackson Airport.
Well, you say it's a hostile takeover, but there are people from Jackson who would be on the board. It would just be distributing around to people who are in those neighboring boards, neighboring areas, right? So that it would be a fair thing, because while the city of Jackson owns the airport, and while that property out there, if people don't know that, it's in Rankin County. How can that be? Years and years ago, Jackson bought that property to put the airport there. They needed the land. Plus, I also think you need to be able to have liquor at an airport. People want to come in from they want to have a drink. So you can do all that stuff. But in the years, I mean, let's face it, Lance, that's the truth of it. I mean, you don't want somebody coming in.
I agree.
I mean, that's the way that goes.
Well, I say it's a hostile takeover because the city owns it, and the legislature decided they're going to take it and spread out the governance over it. But Jackson, it's an asset owned by the city of Jackson.
It could still be.
Yeah,
right?
It could still be. But back to the Warnock Amendment, I think it makes it very tough for a takeover to occur. And so we could be sitting here 10 years from now, and this matter is still in courts. So the only folks who are making money off of it is the attorneys. I think that we need to just sit down and craft a compromise that allows the city to retain ownership but provides involvement and input from the region.
Well, that would be reasonable. Would they be board members, or have you gotten that far with your thinking on that? As it now is the board members. Board people are from the city.
You could put a board together that's a regional board, but where the majority comes out of the city of Jackson.
Not a bad one. Have you proposed that to? In the legislature, I guess. Well, not really. I mean, it has to. We have to have a decision right first from Judge Reeves to do this.
Well, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals kicked it back because the original plaintiffs were past board members. They're no longer board members, so they no longer have standing. So the Fifth Circuit kicked it back to Judge Reeves for further consideration. And I think they're going to swap out some current board members for the past ones. And
of course, like you said, we could be talking about this in 10 years now because there's no time limit on these things, but something should happen before long.
It should. And with the Warnock Amendment, I think it should inspire everybody to come to the table to try to find a compromise.
Is that going to be on your list of items to your priority list? I mean, that's a pretty big thing, pretty big operation.
Yeah, well, I've been talking to some of our leadership already about the whether it makes sense to keep going down this legal road, and whether we should try to put some sort of a deal together.
If people don't know who Raphael Warnock is, he's a United States Senator from Georgia.
Correct. And
that's who he's talking about. And this is State Senator John Horhn, who wants to be the next mayor for the city of Jackson. And the election is going to be in spring.
April 1st.
Yeah. Oh, dear. Oh, dear.
April Fool's Day.
Yes, that's kind of scary. What do you think about that? In 25 days, we'll be deciding on the president. I can't believe it's 25 days so soon. But anyway, we're at 888-808-8637 is our phone number. You can text us at 601-879-4395. And you can watch us at supertalk.fm/Mary. You can see what we look like. We're going to take a break here and be back. Stay right where you are. Well, that's the truth. I think Jackson needs to stand its ground, and Jackson needs to rise. It really, really does. Mm-hmm. And of course, one of the big problems here is crime. Right. It's a problem everywhere, but we don't live everywhere. We live here. And I was just looking at the murder stats, and of course, crime is not all about murder, but we've had usually about 10 a month, and so I was looking for the last few years, and I was looking today, and it's down some from last year. It's up to 90. Right. I was like, well, that's an awful lot. Yes, more than one is enough. But I think you got a good chief, Chief Wade, who comes on this program, and one of the things he's very proud about is that they have had a great increase in solving these murders, over 74% by now. So that's good. What do you think about how should Jackson attack the crime issue?
Well, I think that Chief Wade is doing a good job. I think that there's a lot better cooperation between Capitol Police, JPD, and the Sheriff's Department, and they're doing a more coordinated effort, which is having good results. The crime piece is a complicated issue, and how we're dealing with it is complicated. We still need a jail that's under construction right now. The court system it's still a little slower than it needs to be to process and adjudicate cases. But some of this, you're not going to be able. Since the pandemic, we've seen a rise in violent crime. And more access to guns in the hands of youth. That's a bad combination, and we've got to figure a way to deal with that. I do believe that some of this can be solved with workforce development in terms of providing opportunities for work and job training that allows folks to make a livable wage. A lot of folks, the level of poverty in Jackson is pretty high. And rather than folks, working a penny ante job, they don't do that. They go out and they try to get it from you. And unfortunately, too many folks are involved in those kinds of endeavors. So we've got a mental health crisis in Jackson.
Got that too, yes.
I think it's a crisis of spirit. And whenever you have young people who, for what you and I would consider innocuous reasons, will pick up a gun and go and shoot somebody because you dissed me on Facebook. And so how we deal with that, I think there's a mental health aspect that's got to be dealt with there. But we also need to put together some workforce development that allows folks to make a livable wage. And we've got to change the morals in Jackson.
Well, I think so much of it belongs to parents, whether they have one parent or two parents. It very much belongs to the parents. If they see their parents out drinking and carrying on, what do you think they're going to do? But if the parents would be involved in their lives in a positive way, and by the way, the whole thing about guns, if you just have to teach people, guns don't get up in the morning and say, "Gee, I think I'll kill somebody." The person gets up and does that, and the gun just happens to be there. And if they're going to kill somebody, they might use a baseball bat instead, or a knife or something. But people need to understand how to regulate and be safe about guns. If you're going to have guns in your house, you don't ever touch a gun. I grew up with a military officer who was also a hunter, and if I were to touch a gun, I wouldn't be here. My head would be in the wastebasket someplace.
Well, the other issue that we have in Jackson, and it's not peculiar to Jackson, but we have a lot of families where there isn't the presence of a father in the home.
But yes,
and a single female headed household. A lot of times, the young men get out of control, and there's nobody to rein them back in. They don't have a good role model, and so we've got to put more of that in the community.
Well, whatever happened with that organization, 100 Black Men? That was one of their things, wasn't it? Are they still going?
Excellent organization, and actually their annual banquet, our annual, I'm a member, our annual banquet is tomorrow night at 7 o'clock at the convention center. And young men are the they run the program. They MC the show. They do everything at the banquet, because we're trying to teach them good skills, communication skills, leadership skills, and that sort of thing.
Well, I think Jackson's a mostly Black population anyway, and I think the majority is the middle class. They're beautiful neighborhoods that people don't know anything about, and maintained by people who work and want to have the same goals as everybody else. They don't make any noise. You don't ever hear about them.
Well, I say that there are 4 Jacksons in Jackson. There is the older white community that's over in Northeast Jackson. They're not going anywhere. They have homes.
Although Northeast is I would say pretty well integrated these days.
It is.
But you're talking about like Eastover.
Eastover and Leftover and all this, and Woodland Hills and Fondren. Those are folks. Everybody who's white who could get out of Jackson has gotten out of Jackson. That's what I think. And so there's the elderly, wealthy element of the white community. They're what I call the hipsters of Fondren and Belhaven. Okay. They're living in a cool place, and they're creating a cool place for themselves. Then there's the Black middle class. That's teachers, professionals, etc. They're mostly out northwest, and that's a pretty stable area. Except the average age is 65, and those folks, kids are not coming back home to take over mom and dad's house. So something's got to be figured out with that. But then there's the rest of Jackson, and I think that's closer to another half of Jackson that is either at the poverty level or right on the fringes of being very, very poor. And so that we've got to figure out how we're going to help that part of the community grow and prosper.
I think everybody should be together.
Yeah.
Like all these various churches and things for crime summits and whatever. Don't just do it in the Black churches. Do the white churches too. Supposedly white churches, which I don't think they're all white churches anymore. But everybody's affected by this stuff.
Right.
So include everybody. You are all Jacksons, Jacksonians. When I had Representative Councilman Stokes on the show, there was a whole big long thing. People where I live in Rankin County on Nextdoor were responding to him, and it was, first of all, very positive, and secondly, I was very pleased to see that most of the comments were from people, I don't know what color they are, but mostly people who said, I grew up in Jackson and it's failing, but I want it to be good. We need it to be a good city. We need it to be a strong city. We need to support it. And I'm like, well, good for you all. Instead of taking the attitude of, I used to live there, I don't want to do that anymore. That was a good sign.
Well, Mississippi and Louisiana are 2 states that are losing population, maybe for different reasons. Maybe Louisiana is more about storms and that sort of thing, but in Mississippi, it's quality of life, it's opportunity, and Jackson is the fastest, the the fastest losing of population city in the country.
Well,
for
no
a
one.
city its size.
That's the sort of thing that the next mayor has got to put a stop to that.
Yeah.
That's just got to stop. But you're like, what is there to do in Jackson? Oh, I don't know, get killed. You don't want that.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to do here in Jackson, but the perception and the reality of crime is a deterrent.
Yep.
And we've got to get a handle on the crime, especially random crime, because if you're in a city and you think that some sort of random act of violence might be perpetrated on you, you're not going to go there.
Right. So it's up to leadership is the big thing. I think leadership and vision. You have to have these things in the city of Jackson so that people go, well, no, I don't think I better go to Jackson. I might not a tourist, a regular person, a criminal. No, I better not go there because we're being pushed out. They're the ones who need to be pushed out of the city. I like to see things like the state fair, stuff like that going on in the city of Jackson. That's exciting to see that, and it's too bad we don't have that every week. And there are a lot of things it's too bad we don't do more of, and it needs to be done.
Well,
you're a tourism guy.
We've got to create a destination in Jackson,
yes.
and I'm a big proponent of the flood control district project.
I was going to ask about that one. One lake.
They're trying to get away from that name now, but yeah, the flood control project I think can turn us into a destination and also solve our flooding issues. We've had some talk about putting a casino on the Pearl River. As a matter of, Jackson was originally in the casino language when we first did dockside gaming. But
really?
There was a one-term freshman legislator who just cried and had a fit about it, and they finally said, let's get rid of this guy. We don't need those Jackson votes anyway.
Oh. Yeah, I think that Jackson we could be like a San Antonio, like a Riverwalk, right?
Yeah, a little bigger than Riverwalk, but
yes.
But just as a matter of principle, once I found out about that, I introduce a bill every year to put a casino on the Pearl River. But in the last year or so, we've had a lot of movement on that, and I think we'll see a little movement.
That would be
in this
wonderful.
Upcoming session.
That would do so much for the city. I mean, just the city alone, and then visitors, because you're on I-55, essentially, would be terrific.
Right. We've got to take care. The only market that would be impacted in a negative way would be the Vicksburg market. So we've got to figure out a way to make them whole in this process, but I think that can be done.
Yeah, they didn't want to have a casino on the Big Black River because it was too close.
Correct.
Well, you know what? Competition kind of works. That just sort of annoyed me. And we're far enough away. It'd be a boutique casino because that's in terms of how much room we would have. But what's wrong with that? If Vicksburg doesn't like it, well, come on. They got river boats coming in all the time now. You know that.
Right.
They got Viking and all these, these big boats. So they can have that. The Pearl River can have its own little thing over here as part of a whole thing. I think it'd be great. There's room for everybody, don't you think?
I believe so, and we've got to do something intentional for Jackson that helps the city. We need incentives for development. Last year that we had a bill that came out that would provide ways to incentivize development within CCID. And so I'm saying, wait a minute now, the Capital Complex Improvement District is the only place that doesn't need these kinds of incentives. They're working fine on their own. We need to incentivize the rest of Jackson. So we'll be coming back with some legislation this year to try to do that.
So you've got to go do the legislature.
Yeah.
That's coming up, gosh, real soon. Very soon.
Before you know it.
I mean, really, this is the middle of October already, just about.
Yeah.
So how are you going to do that? How are you going to be in the legislature and campaign for mayor? How's that going to work?
It's not going to work very well.
Legislature got to dedicate.
We're going to have to use our time wisely and really plan out our schedules a lot better than a lot more so than when we're not in session. Because there are going to be some important things that I need to be at the Capitol for, but also I've got to be out campaigning. So it's going to be a tight dance.
And what do you think is going to be the hot stuff at the legislature then?
Some sort of consideration of a tax cut, whether it's income tax reduction or elimination, or a grocery tax reduction or elimination. But I think that's going to be the biggest issue. I think we'll see maybe another stab at expanding Medicaid, but I don't know that we'll get there next year.
People talk about getting away with the state income tax. Well, then where is the money going to come from that it's being used for? Well, property owners. Well, it's just going to increase. All you're going to do is move the tax from here to there. and property owners are going to suffer for that one, and renters will too because their landlords have to pay more taxes. So I'm really
back in I think 2005.
Can you hold the thought?
Sure.
It's a break coming in here.
Oh, sure.
All right, this is State Senator John Horhn running for mayor of Jackson. I'm Mary Wieden, and you will be back in a couple minutes. Hey everybody, welcome back to Mary Wieden and You. State Senator John Horhn, who wants to be known as Mayor John Horhn of the city of Jackson, is here in the studio. 888-808-8637, texting at 601-879-4395. And you can watch us at supertalk.fm/Mary. And when we went out, we were talking about state income tax, doing away with it. Where would the money come from to replace it? So, because you also, Senator John Horhn has to be a senator come the legislature, and so that's going to be one of the topics.
Well, we had an effort to slash the grocery tax back in the early 2000s, and it was a very contentious bill. A lot of enthusiasm for it, but there was some pushback against it, and I had some pushback against it because that grocery tax also covers the help for cities. It also covers help for education. And what they told us, the folks who were proposing it, is that we're going to replace this with a cigarette tax. And I'm saying, wait a minute, don't we have a smoking cessation program that we're trying to push out? So we're trying to get people to quit smoking, and yet we're going to depend on the cigarette tax to cover school books and education. It didn't make sense, so I voted against that measure. I hope that whatever we come up with this year will be fair, and will also make the cities whole, but not have any negative impact on things like education.
Well, I would certainly like to see the sales tax on groceries go down. Of course, we're in the middle of just god-awful inflation. Go to the grocery store and be shocked. You get two, three little things like $50. Like what?
Right.
It's
well,
pretty
for
terrible.
my money, the grocery tax ought to be what we focus on, and not our income tax is not that onerous right now.
I feel that way too. It's there, but it's not going to kill you.
Grocery tax impacts everybody.
It sure does.
And it's a regressive tax because folks with the least amount of money, pay a disproportionate amount for groceries, and if we can eliminate some of that, I'm all for it.
I'd like to see that too. There was a story studied out so very long ago that it was like a survey of highest grocery prices in the country, 1 through 10. We were up in there someplace. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know if we were number 1, but we were in the top 5 or something like that. It was like, we tax our groceries. Most people don't.
Right.
So that would be very helpful for economic growth of the state of Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, you'd like to see some of the Amazons and whatever come into Jackson, wouldn't you? Yeah.
Well, I've been trying to get the right contact to have a conversation with them. I think with Jackson, the Amazon data center site being right across the street, literally right across the street from the city of Jackson, that there ought to be some way that we can get some of that to bleed over into Jackson. Maybe some data support entities could be established. I'd like to see something maybe done with Lake Hyco. We've got 500 contiguous acres, really 740 contiguous acres that are available and have been restored or are at the point of being restored. And we ought to try to do something big and important with that land. It's
Is there still water in it?
No.
It's been
no.
now it's just
it has been completely
like a dry dam.
drained. It took 2 years to do that, and the levee, the dirt from the levee, was pushed into the old lake bed site. And where the hole was now is completely flat.
Oh my goodness! So so you could do something commercial with it.
Yes,
quite possibly
if you so chose.
Okay, if you got somebody, depending on what you would get. Do you think that we need some better or refurb something like Metro Center, for instance? What in the world is going on with Metro Center? Is it crashing, or it seems like people try to pump money into it?
Yeah. So there's a gentleman who's taken a part of it and is trying to turn it into a film studio. I think that JPD still has some operations of a precinct over there, but it's in bad shape. It's really in bad shape, and it's got to be rethought. Now, I was involved with a $28 million senior living facility that we just cut the ribbon on at the old Holiday Inn Southwest.
Yes, I
Highway
saw
80.
that. I was amazed at that.
So we're hoping that project will help to catalyze further development along Highway 80. But Metro Center, and at one time we were trying to get an Amazon fulfillment center at that site, but didn't work out. But we need to get some professionals in to tell us how we can repurpose and repose that Metro Center.
Well, if not Amazon, there must be plenty of other companies that could be worked with. But, I think you have to probably be the mayor before you can. Well, it doesn't help. It doesn't hurt being in the legislature. But things like that is what the city needs. And is Highway 80 still as treacherous as it was in terms of just junk? And
it's not as bad as it was, but it's still bad. And
it's a good corner.
Someone needs to wake up with Highway 80 on their minds every day. The same as I-55, the I-55 corridor. With as much traffic as we see on that interstate, you would think that we'd have better offerings than the Oyo Hotel.
Yes.
But it needs to be somebody's job that they wake up to every morning.
Can be done.
It can be done.
It really can be done if people want to do it. And I think that too many people have kind of said, and you can't say that. You can't do that. You can't say that about a capital city.
We can kick the can down the road and not take responsibility for trying to turn Jackson around. I've opted to try to turn Jackson around, and so I don't think it's impossible, but it's not too impossible. But somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to step up. And if I had in sight someone else that I thought might be able to do it, I would say, take this cup from me, because I don't really need. I've got other things I would rather be doing than this, but somebody's got to do it.
Absolutely. How much money is it going to cost you, or is it costing you already, to run for mayor? It's not a cheap
We're estimating
proposition.
about $800,000.
And how's the fundraising going?
It's going slow right now, but very encouraging.
Well, you just declared a couple of weeks ago, right? So
yeah. But I was really gratified. To talk with there are some surprising pockets of money in Jackson that I never would have really looked at. And there was there's this one lady that I've worked with over the years to help with her. She had a transportation company, non-emergency medical transport. She had a home care business and adult daycare. Well, she doesn't have the transportation anymore, but she has the other two still. Mm-hmm. And so she was, "What you gonna do, John? What you gonna do?" And I said, "Well, we're close. We're getting close." She said, "Okay, well, let me help to incentivize you." And she left her conference room and came back in a few minutes later and handed me a check for $10,000.
Whoa!
And
thank you.
I'm just saying, wow, this is a very generous of. She said, "We need to change this city, and you're going to do it."
Good for her.
And I'm going to help you do it. And so
there are people like that out there.
There are people out there like that.
Yeah. So
just unassuming. I never would have thought that she could write a check that big, without it hurting a lot. But it didn't seem to hurt very much with the manner in which she just handed it over. But,
just need a few more of those. That's it.
I'm encouraged because people are not giving up on Jackson. A lot of folks want to give up on Jackson, but I think that the heart and soul of the people of Jackson don't want to give up. They want to see things get better. And that means we've got to bring about change, and we've got to put together the kind of team effort. One person is not going to do this. It's got to be a team effort.
What relationship? Well, I don't know if you've got it now, but you would be having a relationship with fellow mayors around. That'd be Brandon, Pearl, Ridgeland, Madison, right around here. George Flaggs over in Vicksburg.
Yes,
would be
George is doing a good job over there. The sense I get is everybody wants to see Jackson do better. I think we understand that as a state, if our capital city, our largest city, is floundering, then the state's going to flounder. And we're seeing stuff bleeding over that's in Jackson, bleeding over into these surrounding communities. They don't talk about it. It doesn't make the news as much, but it's happening. And so it's in everybody's best interest to save Jackson and to turn it around.
So you just have how many more months? Let me see. You've got about 6 months. About 6 months to go. And there's a field. I don't know. There are several other people running. I don't. I know Lumumba's running, and some other people. When's the first primary going to be?
April 1st.
The first primary.
Primary is April 1st, and June 3rd is the runoff.
June 3rd is the day.
Yeah.
Well, that's the runoff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the day.
I'm sorry. No, I think June 3rd is the general election.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
okay,
right.
So,
I would think that the primary would be 3 weeks after the April 1st. I mean, the runoff would be
3 weeks after
3 weeks after the April 1st primary.
And so, really, it's like 9 months, 9 months to do this. And when are qualifying papers? What's the deadline for qualifying papers?
January 2nd is when it opens, and January 31st is when it closes.
Okay, and you get your papers ready to go?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how to think about a large field of people. Some of these elections attract. It's like if you could make it a little bit smaller, it makes it more sensible to.
A large field is never fun because some of it it's actually a waste of time. I mean, everybody has a right to run, to compete. But some of these guys don't have a snowball's chance, and of making it. They really ought to take this thing as seriously as it should be, and only candidates who have a viable opportunity to win ought to be in the race. But that's not the way it happens a lot of times.
Well, the way it happens right now is we're out of time. Senator John Horhn, candidate for mayor of the city of Jackson, you'll be back before all this stuff starts really shaking out, I do believe. And good luck with the legislature as well. We'll be seeing you. All right, everybody, have a good weekend.